Hello, I'm Pastor Bucky Beach at Good Shepherd Lutheran Church, Lutheran Campus Ministry in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And this is a sermon for the first Sunday after Christmas. And Merry Christmas to you. In the midst of these long winter nights and days, a glimmer of hope has come. No matter our circumstances, no matter where we are in the world or who we are spending our holiday with or without, a glimmer of hope is there for each of us. In a time of oppression, a time of fear, we can find the hope of Christ born in our world. We need these days of Christmas so much this year. It's dark, and for many of us, it's dark inside too. And we weren't together on Christmas Eve, even for us to gather outside with candles burning, listening to a few great songs if we couldn't sing them ourselves. And the reason was because roads were snow-packed and visibility was bad and it was windy and it was cold. And we got this pandemic thing going on. It was better to stay home and stay safe. So for many, there were very mixed feelings on Christmas Eve. I myself could get really angry and sad and depressed. And I did when I know other congregations gathered on Christmas Eve and we didn't. It's hard. What I miss most is you, our community. It's a hard lesson for people to learn, and especially probably pastors, that church is not a building. Church is a community. It's a ministry. It's outreach. However, a particular community feels called to be active. This year, we can't be together for all the stuff that goes on day to day and event by event, sometimes responding to some and sometimes being proactive in planning things, happening by happening. We decided to be safe and consider the most vulnerable in our midst and thus not gather for worship. We decided to pay attention to those who understand this virus better than anyone else because likely they have felt a call to science, to medicine, and specifically for some, epidemiology, just like you have maybe felt a call to some other vocation. And they say the best practice is not to gather inside or even outside, no matter the temperature, if rates of infection and death are high in the area in which you live. Now, we may stretch that on Epiphany, the 12th day of Christmas, and have a bonfire outside to make up for Christmas Eve, the bonfire that we were going to have, and hope the virus dies of cold before we do. And wouldn't it be cool if it died of the same loneliness that we have intentionally put ourselves through? Now, all that's not going to happen by January 6th, I know. But wouldn't it be nice to be outside together and burn our Christmas trees and let the light shine? Celebrate. Yes, at the risk of saying this too many times, it has been emotionally hard. I have grown perversely fond of the saying, "Sucks to be you." It makes so much more emotional sense than simply saying, "Well, it is what it is." Though both are true, I will claim my right to be frustrated. I never thought that I would quote Pastor Rick Warren, but a parishioner sent me an article called "An Advent Lament in the Pandemic." So here's a line from a conversation the writer had with Warren as he wrote this article. Quote, "Shepherds, that's what pastor means, are called to protect God's flock, not expose it to danger. And I'm not willing to risk people's health just to have a live audience to speak to. Unquote. Now, our own bishops have said many things about how we understand ourselves in Lutherans during this time of pandemic, and Luther certainly said some incredible, blatant, and even rude things back in his day during the plague. But of the things that our bishops have reminded us, I would highlight this. We don't need to meet together to be the body of Christ in the world. Right now, we will not gather as some do in order to wave the banner of religious freedom. Our banner might very well proclaim the freedom we have is for others first, especially the vulnerable. So, beloved congregation, may the slowly increasing daylight give us hope that we too eventually will gather again, doing what we love to do, being a motley crew in the same room, celebrating our life together. The light is beginning to shine, a tiny light, but a tiny light in the darkness is a beacon of hope, which is exactly what we need right now. The words we proclaim in this season are clear. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And that reminds me of a time I was spelunking in Jewel Cave in the Black Hills National Forest with some staff from the Lutheran Camp Outlaw Ranch. One of them was Pete. Pete had a sense of humor. So there we were, down in a narrow tunnel in a vast cave that winds around, and it goes on and on and on, and it's tight and it's cramped and it's extremely rough to crawl on this stuff. So we're not at that point in the area that tourists go ooh and ah about stalactites and stalagmites. I mean, that's fun, but we weren't there. No, we were crawling around through holes so tight you could barely move, and much less turn around. All the time, of course, hoping and probably praying that we would actually come to a place where we could turn around. I can't imagine backing out the whole way. Well, we were with a guide, of course, the famous caver and explorer Jan Kahn, who mapped hundreds of miles in these underground caves. Well, Jan and her husband, Herb, were the hobbits, or better, the dwarves of the day, but that's another story. At one point, Jan asked us to turn off our headlamps and experience the darkness. Well, I thought I had been in the dark before. At another Lutheran camp called Koinonia in southeast New York State, we used to take inner city kids from 3rd to 6th grade who were from New York City and New Jersey. We took them out on night hikes, and they would be just terrified, climbing all over us because they had never been in the dark before. Well, the kind of darkness in Jewel Cave was not that kind of darkness, an absence of streetlights. We knew the walls and the ceilings of the tunnels that we were crawling through were right here. Though without our headlamps on, as Jan asked us to do, we couldn't see them. We could smell them, but mostly we could feel their presence closing in on us. And there we lay in the dark. And after a little while, I saw these 2 faint lights, about as wide as eyes would be. Sort of green, sort of floating in the dark. And they were looking at me. Well, what's down there in Jewel Cave that our guide didn't tell us about? What the hell was that staring at me? It was Pete, messing with me with his headlamp. A light can be a beacon of hope. But a light can scare us too. Sometimes our own light, the light that is shining from within, can scare us. I mean, for example, do you think Jesus would have been okay knowing what his parents were doing to him when they took him to the temple? To have him presented, dedicated to God? Now, I'm not even going to talk about his circumcision, because had he known that was going to happen, he probably would have run like hell. But he was too young to know. And so he was being dedicated, presented to God. Do you think he would have been okay with that had he known what that would mean in his life? Was he always okay with the light that shone within him? I mean, he may have been the Son of God, but he was also human. And I get the definite impression that the light that shone within him at times frightened him. I'm not comparing us with Jesus, but we get through what we have to get through. When it's dark, we muddle through, feeling our way along when we can't see so well. It is what it is. But it's not that simple. Well, since when is life simple? Within the darkness of the world, or the darkness within each of us, bad things can happen. And so can good things. Great things. Some indigenous people teach that there is one power in this world. We can use it for either good or evil. It's a choice we make. Now, I should slow down here, pause a little bit to let you identify the ways this particular time of darkness in our lives has been most challenging to you. So that when it's darkest and you are confronted with choices and you make choices, you know what I mean. Yes, there are times that we have made choices that were not good. But there are other times too, probably even more, that you have chosen well. Not necessarily easily, but you chose what you did and dealt with it. And good things, great things, have come of it. I have heard many times that during this pandemic, many have discovered something good that has been born or reborn in their lives. And perhaps, theologically speaking, that is one way to understand the paradoxical claim of the movement from Advent to Christmas, that God has arrived in Jesus' birth, that Jesus is coming, and then he has arrived in his birth, and then he dies, and then he is born again. And he's born again year after year. We go from Advent to Christmas. Somehow Christ is born again. The particular way God chooses to act. And forgive my anthropomorphic ascribing to God human characteristics. The particular way God chose to act in Jesus is through being fully present in our world. Born of Mary. And then the paradox is, he is coming, he is here, he is gone, he is here, but he's coming again, and he's always been here all the time. But the hardest part to understand is perhaps that God is somehow born of human flesh. And now on this first Sunday after Christmas, our readings in Luke 2 jump to another event, his dedication in the temple. But even before his birth, all eyes were upon him and his coming. After his birth, more eyes sought him out, some in the dark, like the shepherds and the Magi, and Herod, of course. But before Jesus had a choice in the matter, he was taken to the temple to be dedicated to God. And an old man, Simeon, recognized him as one who is destined for the falling and rising of his people, and who will be opposed. And then the old and wise, Holy Spirit-filled Anna shows up and calls the baby Jesus out. I know who you are and what you are destined for. No pressure there. So as he grew up, do you think the light shining on or in or through Jesus might have scared him just a bit? And what is our reaction when we grow up thinking that Jesus, God in human form, is looking at us? Kind of like those eyes in the dark of Jewel Cave. Part of the scary thing is that he sees your darkness. He also sees your light. That's what love is. It sees your darkness. It sees you for who you are and loves you for your light, along with, and maybe even in spite of, your darkness. And then, just like Simeon and Anna called this baby Jesus out, God calls you out. Or, in a better understanding of what that phrase means in today's cancel or call-out culture, Jesus calls you up. He calls you to act from your inner light, not your inner darkness. We are not called to be who we are not. We are called to be who we are, a child of God. It doesn't matter what your gender or your skin color is. It doesn't matter what side of the tracks you're born on. Or, as is normal for parents to do when a child is born, check if all your fingers and toes are there. What matters is that you are a child of God. Which sounds like a normal thing for a pastor to say, right? Well, yeah, it is. But what if those magi had fallen asleep and not paid any attention to what was happening in the heavens? What if Elizabeth had just said, gee, this baby is really kicking today, instead of recognizing something and saying to Mary that the child in her womb was responding to the child in Mary's womb? What if the angel Gabriel had just been floating around in the heavens, not paying any attention, and never got around to talking to Mary? And what if Mary had just listened to her people, who must have felt shame because of her pregnancy? And what if Joseph would have just walked away, like a lot of guys do, from his pregnant girlfriend? What if no one at the time was really looking for a Messiah, having just given up and chosen to live in the darkness that filled their lives? And what if Jesus? He could have just said no. No to who he was. We can always choose to say no to the creation that we are. But saying yes doesn't mean we will not struggle. You know that. Saying yes to who you are, to what life gives you, is hard. It takes time and work to be who you are called to be. Just as the emerging light after winter solstice becomes noticeable by seconds and then minutes, it takes time. And it helps to notice as it happens and call it out. Call it up. Let it be there. But then the opposite is also true. Beginning in the summer months for us, darkness increases at the same rate. Just as we know in the winter that light will emerge, we know the darkness will too. Life happens, and we are wounded. Hopefully we are healed. And then we are wounded again, and hopefully healed again. Perhaps you are one who understands the paradox full well, that while full light is not here now, it is coming. And if you understand that, you will also know that darkness will happen again. Fully living within that rhythm is called grace. It's a question of balance, but it's also a question of living fully within the balance, knowing, believing that you are a child of the God who is with you when it is darkest. And when you don't feel the need for a God so much, God is still there. Thank God for Simeon and Anna, who noticed and took time to call out and to call up the light in that baby Jesus who was just born. May we all have a Simeon and Anna in our lives, and may we be a Simeon and an Anna for someone else. Thank you for listening, and Merry Christmas.